All right, Andrew Harvey is here, managing editor. What's the exact job title that you're working with right now at Golf Club Atlas?
Managing partner would be the official title.
Managing partner. Well, you have, I would say, based on your Twitter account over the last 6 months, I have been wanting to talk to you for a while about some of your journeys this year, particularly your two most recent trips to Florida and Texas. It seems like there's some pretty exciting things happening in the space that I can't wait to dive into you with. So thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk golf. Any excuse to talk about golf courses, I'm there.
Well, this is going to be a bit of a architecture roundup for us. I haven't done this in a while where I fully had the ability to devote the entire podcast to what's happening in the architecture space. And I've done this a couple times in the past where I bring on somebody who I know is also pretty interested in the topic. And so for the listeners that may be checking this out for the first time, give a little bit about your background. How did you find yourself at Golf Club Atlas? How did you find yourself entrenched in this world?
Yeah, for sure. So honestly, I just grew up playing competitive golf, and I think that allowed me to largely just travel and see some golf courses. And they weren't anything too crazy necessarily, but you're young and you're just playing different golf courses, and so that opens up the curiosity in a child, right? Where you just what's going on? Why is this different? I just played this golf course. It's different than this golf course, or it's better or worse or whatever. And then I think the sort of the watershed moment for me was playing Banff Springs. So I'm from Western Canada originally, and Banff is obviously famous mountain golf course, Stanley Thompson. It's got that one famous, Devil's Cauldron hole down into the valley. And I played that, and I kind of went back to my local country club, and I was just like, what does it do differently that this doesn't? And not that I grew up on a nice golf course, but it's not world class. So all of a sudden that piqued my interest on like what's going on with that. And then there was this guy at the club called Mike Maisie, and so Mike played I think Canadian Tour and maybe a bit of Nationwide or whatever it was back in the day. And he was playing, he was going to Pine Valley in the Netherlands and Bandon Dunes and all these places. And I just sort of started picking his brain. And that eventually led to me starting my own sort of website blog thing called drewharvey.com. And then that eventually merged into this thing called Beyond the Contour, which was
Sure.
largely, Canadian based, I would say. I mean, there was some US content, but it was mostly just what's going on in Canada, golf architecture, talking about some of the golf courses. And I think what made us interesting was it was pretty candid, I would say, in terms of like golf in Canada is still very much kind of caught in that 90s cycle that the US kind of came out of. And so it was very easy. It was like low hanging fruit for us to talk about what was going on up here in the light of the US because we were very lucky that we got to travel a little bit down there.
Sure.
And then that eventually just caught on, and Rand Morissette, who obviously started Golf Club Atlas with his brother, and then Ben Cowan-Dewar and Joe Andrioli were also involved in the early days. And so we just started talking, and we sort of had similar aligned goals, and we felt similar about golf architecture, and we just said, why don't we merge? I mean, he's got the established voice, and I really wanted to kind of take my thing to the next level, and so that's where we're at now.
Well, I'm glad you did. I was just catching up on I just read your old Barnwell profile the other day, which is a course I was fortunate enough to see over the fall. And I think you do great work. I obviously spend a lot of time on Golf Club Atlas, both on their forum and just reading some of your longer form pieces. And so we started talking mainly a little bit about you were posting all of these pictures from a couple golf courses in Florida that I'm just really interested about. I think there's a lot of stuff happening in Florida, a lot of mass. I didn't really expect it to become this hotbed of golf course architecture right now and potentially in the future as well. And I know that you made a pretty lengthy trip where you knocked off a ton of new courses in that area. So I probably want to start with you went to Florida and then Texas, right?
Yeah, Florida was in January, and then Texas was in recently, honestly, end of March into early April.
Okay, let's start with Florida and then we'll go to Texas in the second half. But what prompted that Florida trip? What were you most excited to see when you were heading down there?
So honestly, I've started to go every year just with the PGA show. My background was in I was a golf professional at St. George's up here in Toronto, so I would go every year, and um, it just turned into this yearly thing that I'd go to Florida and I'd kind of do a trip around, and I generally I was driving. I've flown twice and driven twice, just stop along and see some friends along the East Coast and play some golf on the way down and the way back up, and this trip in particular, I felt like there was so much happening in Florida now. Like there was a lot last January also, but it's kind of seemed like most of the stuff has kind of come through on the other end, or a large swath of it, call it. And so I just built the trip around seeing kind of the new stuff that had opened, because it honestly is probably the hottest golf market in architecture today, where there's so many people building interesting stuff.
Why do you think that is? I mean, can it just be as easily explained as there's a bunch of wealthy people from the Northeast that are wanting to retire to the Palm Beach area and join these golf courses like Apogee and in the future the Ranch and Highgrove, and this model that's worked so well at places like a Hoopie, Florida is just the next place in line for that to happen?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do, obviously, with wealthy individuals moving down there. And I think the main reason for that, or the boom, call it, is that they play the NGLAs and the Sabonics and the Brooklines and Marions of the world, and then they go down to Florida. And not that there was many great clubs in Florida, but I think generally the golf courses as you got older were pretty hard, and they started to lose their appeal pretty quickly. Versus, like, you mentioned Apogee. One could reasonably putt the golf ball around Apogee most of the way. Even, and it's still a very good golf course. The greens are very interesting at Apogee, but it's just a bit more conducive to growing old.
Mhm.
So all these people moving down there, they have a bit of money, they play a really good golf course in the Northeast, and then they go down and they just get beat up for the winter, and they come back and they go, well, why can't I have this down there? And I think that's when you start to see, like, Apogee and Sabonic are the same developer, and Friars Head and the Ranch are the same developer. And so there's a lot of, like, kind of overlap with that. And that would be kind of my best guess, I guess.
Do you think the bubble is going to pop, or do you see all of these golf? Because it seems like it's a bit of a rat race right now, and part of my brain is telling me, well, not every single one of these golf clubs are going to be able to succeed. I mean, some of these golf clubs they're now going to be in competition with each other, and it's not like every single golf. I mean, just in Florida alone, I'm thinking about, MacArthur's backyard, all of the 3 courses at Apogee. We'll get to Highgrove. The Ranch has 2 golf courses as well, Sandglass as well. I mean, do you feel like all of these golf courses are destined for success, or do you foresee 1 or 2 of them emerging as like the preeminent place that gets recognized both in the architecture community and maybe kind of at a broader macro sense in terms of like the destination that everyone is talking about?
Yeah, it's a good question. If I was a betting man, which I'm not all the time, but sometimes, if if I was a betting man, I would think most of these survive. I do think that there will be, you know, let's say there's 30 facilities in Florida being built right now. I bet you 5 of them don't make it. Five
Yeah.
to seven of them, because I think they're so much better suited to like a longer, uh, lifespan. Call it, where somebody could play a Gil Hanse golf course generally from 10 years old to 85, right? Versus, like, maybe not the best example, but, like, Bears Club or something. Like, if you're not a 5 handicap, you're not really going to want to play Bears Club. So I think it's
It's
just
very
conducive
difficult
to,
golf
like,
course. Yeah.
it's a very difficult golf course, right? And so it's like, why would I want to be a member there when I'm 78 years old and I hit it 210 yards or 180 yards or whatever, 100 yards, whatever it is, when I can go to Apogee or the Ranch or Sandglass and get it around, um, for much longer. So I think these new courses are going to cannibalize some of that quote unquote old Florida, and it's not really old Florida, but it's like mid-century Florida. Um,
Sure.
and there will be a couple that don't make it, but I think overall, just the architecture itself lends itself to a bit more longevity.
And how many golf courses did you end up seeing on that trip? And what was the one that kind of stood out the most to you? What caught your attention the most? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I saw. It's hard to say, 12 or 13 maybe golf courses in Florida at the time, and that most of it, the good stuff, is in Hope Sound,
Yeah,
which is sort of MacArthur and the Ranch and Sandglass and Apogee. On the other side of the state, I think the one that obviously it's made a lot of media news just because it's public, and Cabot does a really good job of pushing out content, and lots of creators go there, and they like media events and whatever. But
sure.
the Roost course at Citrus Farms is really quite good.
A lot of coverage. A lot of coverage.
A lot of coverage, yeah, and that was mostly mostly targeted at Karoo, because Karoo is the big expansive sand and crazy contour, and just really quite the aggressive, really fascinating golf course. And then Roost, on the other hand, is like the exact opposite to that. So it's, I would say, more subdued. There's some sandy areas and whatever, but it's kind of in the old live oaks of Florida, and it's just got these big heaves. Like, it honestly feels more like the Carolinas, or North Georgia or something. And so in that regard, I think the Roost is very interesting, that it doesn't feel like Florida. And I know so many people say that, but it's like, you still go to Stream Song, and yeah, I'm the biggest Stream Song red guy on the planet. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's still Florida. Like, it's
That's
like
another one I was going to
water.
add. I forgot. I should have even mentioned at the top is that Stream Song's building another David McClay Kid course as well.
Yeah, I just missed that one, unfortunately. I think they announced at the PGA show, and I just didn't have
Yeah.
time to go check out the property or whatever. But yeah, that's crazy. But then, in Hope Sound, for example, like, MacArthur Backyard is really quite good.
Mhm.
That people get a bit hyperbolic, and they start talking about it's the best in Florida or the second best in Florida or whatever. And every golf course needs a bit of time to just settle in. It's not that it needs to grow in or anything, but it's just opinions kind of run really hot early. But it's really good. I mean, it's Core Crenshaw. It's very flat, I would say, but the strategies are very good. It's very beautiful, which is, I don't want to say surprising, but just the aesthetic that they chose with sort of like the Pinehurst #2, almost sandy, bleeding into the fairways, is really unique for Florida. And it just plays really good. So MacArthur would be very good. Citrus Farms Roost is very good. I really liked, Kinsale was fun as well. I mean, that's just like it's maybe like 95 acres of golf, and that's in Naples.
Kinsale's Hans
And
as well, right?
yeah, Hanson. It's they came out initially in saying it was template inspired, like Rainer templates. And there's loose interpretations of it. So it's like, I would be like a self-dedicated golf nerd. Like, I would know most of the templates if I saw them. And you
Sure.
kind of have to think about them. Like, they're not as obvious as you'd think. And I think that's really fun, is because it's sort of like, in music, when there's like this really deep rooted sample that only like the true music nerds kind of pick up on, and you kind of go, oh, that bass line's from that 1976 jazz album. You hear like Kendrick Lamar or whoever, Taylor Swift using it, like whoever's using it, and you kind of go, oh, that's very cool. So it was kind of like that for me, where I was like, that's a neat concept.
So it seems like for you, the standouts were more Cabot, Citrus, and the backyard. Where does that leave Apogee for you? How would you characterize your experience on Apogee? Because that was one of the immediate ones that popped out to me, just in terms of the loudness of this property. It has 3 golf courses, 1 Kyle Phillips, 1 Tom Fazio, and then the third is Gil and Jim, right?
Yeah, so the first one was Gill and Jim. That's the West, and I only played that
Okay.
one. I didn't have time for the Tommy Fazio, Mike Davis one, and then
But
the Phillips one is
all
under.
three are open now, right?
Other than the Phillips one, that one
Okay.
opens this fall, I believe. It was under construction when I was there anyway. I mean, Apogee is very, the Gil Hanse course I thought was pretty good. Um, it's very stylistically similar to the park, I would say,
Hmm.
and I love the park. The greens are a bit more tuned up at Apogee. I think they're very good. Like if you had like 18 sets of greens and you simply took like heat maps of them. Like Apogee is a very very good golf course. I think one thing that maybe it gets a bit out of hand is like it's really quite wide.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not a criticism of Gil and Jim's work because obviously they do very good work. I just find that like modern architecture has almost swung the pendulum too far, where
In
now
terms
we're
of
building
width, you're saying.
just width. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like there's nothing wrong with like a 60 yard, 70 yards between tree lines, right? Like we don't need it 110, 120, 130 yards. And not all the fairways are that big, but there was a lot of tee shots at Apogee that you're just kind of like, okay, like, it's a good green. And I just sort of bashed it out there and whatever. So, and obviously the Tommy Fazio course looks complete opposite to that. So, and that's probably more of a testament to the facility itself and trying to diversify than it is
Hmm.
the actual architecture. But I thought Apogee was good. I didn't, it's not top 10 in Florida or anything, but
It
I thought it
didn't.
was
It
good.
didn't.
It was
It
good.
didn't resonate for you in the way that Cabot did, or the backyard did.
Exactly. And I think honestly, the big thing for me with those two, I think, is just the scale makes sense if that has any
Sure.
meaning.
Well, that was what I
Where
was
it's
going to ask you next. Is like, which of these places has the best land? Like, which is the most overwhelming from a property? What do you think is the best site?
it's hard to say. I think like Roost, for example, has like 100 feet of elevation change, top to bottom.
Hmm.
So that in itself goes immediately to number one in Florida. Modern, like of the courses that they're building recently, where generally, Hope Sound's all flat and et cetera. Naples is all flat. So that's quite aggressive. But then there's parts of it that aren't sand, so that's difficult. Where MacArthur they drudged basically sand from the ground and just like put it out there, so it's all sandy. But yeah, I mean, Citrus Farms is a great property. Highgrove, which is going to open this fall, that is a really good property.
And Highgrove is another Gill and Jim.
Yeah, another Gill and Jim, which is crazy to think.
They're busy
Uh,
men these days.
well, Jim lives in Florida, I think, is
Yeah.
what I was told. So he's just like, anytime they get a job in Florida, he's happy because it's a home game. So I think
Sure.
that's part of it. Because
Where's Gill's home base?
I think Malvern,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, just outside Philly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that one too, when I read your you had written a little bit about the construction of Highgrove, because it's obviously not open yet, but they already started building there. What's exciting about that place? What would make you say, okay, Highgrove is one that we should pay attention to as well, in terms of how it separates from this giant conglomeration of the apogees and the ranches and the other golf courses we've already talked about? What did you find intriguing potentially about Highgrove?
Yeah, Highgrove. Like I'm just going to compare it to the Gale and Jim courses in the area, in the state anyway. So like Kinsale and an Apogee are flat.
Hmm.
And there's a reason the park is so good because the park isn't flat, right? Like it's it's got the hilly back nine, the front nine's very good. Maybe it gets like 20% too wide, but every golf course now kind of does. But the park, I'm a big park guy, so the reason that they kind of have the leg up at the park is because they had that piece of ground, right? And so Highgrove is very similar, where all of a sudden you have like this big dune ridge cutting through the property. So immediately it's like, wow, this is a great property. And then you start going into the back nine, which goes into the I think it's the lemon and the orange groves. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's lemons and oranges, but you start going into like this. It's just basically heaving sand. Like it's a good property wherever you are, let alone Florida. So and I think they know that, right? Like I'm sure there's a bit more pressure in a good site. Like, if you get a flat site in Hope Sound, for example,
Hmm.
you just do what you can do, right? And you try and build captivating golf, and if with guys like Gil and Jim, it's going to turn out good. Just they're obviously at the top of the game, so it's going to turn out good. But then Highgrove, when you get a good site, it's rolling sand. I would assume that there's a bit more pressure. It's almost like playoff games. Like it's still basketball, it's still hockey, but now it's tuned up a little bit. So I think Highgrove is going to be quite something because it has the benefits of it's a good site anywhere, let alone Florida.
Yeah, and then the ranch too would have been well, I wanna ask you about ranch and then also Sandglass as well, but what have you heard about the ranch? I mean, my question with every single one of these places is like, what do they do to separate here? How do you stand out from the pack when you have all of the best designers that are doing it right now, all designing new golf courses that are going to open in a 12 to 3 year span? All of them, I think, with I don't want to say the same overhanging design philosophy, but let's be honest here. A lot of these golf courses are going to look like each other. Like a lot of the sites are very similar. And so a ranch, this is Whitman, Axlin, Cutton, and I believe they've worked under Core and Crenshaw quite a bit, and they didn't um I don't believe because they were on the Friar's Head site, right? Because they
Mhm.
obviously had a relationship with the Friar's Head developer as well.
Yeah, like I think the big thing to keep in mind is there's certainly
Is Ken
like
Baxt, right? Ken,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because Ken, my understanding is Ken developed a strong relationship with these guys at Friar's Head. It was Corin Crenshaw still taking the wheel at Friar's Head, but he's kind of basically giving them the car keys with this one.
Yeah, exactly. So Dave Axlin has long been one of Bill Core and Ben Crenshaw's go-to shapers. So obviously he partnered with Rod Whitman, who Rod's history in golf architecture is very interesting because at one point, he was a Pete Dye guy, like Bill Core and like Tom Doke, and so he was actually roommates with Tom Doke at one point. And he's really good friends with Bill Core. They have a long history. I don't remember exactly. I think he went down to like Bill Core is basically why he got into golf architecture.
Sure.
And he's put together a quiet portfolio of like really solid golf courses. Obviously, Cabot Links is in the World Top 100, and Sagebrush and Blackhawk are you know top 12 in Canada, top 11 in Canada, whatever you want to go. So I mean, the ranch has a leg up here, and that Ken Bask is obviously Friar's Head is an amazing place. So they have the advantage of having a developer that's built something of such high quality. In Apogee's case, Sabonic is a very good facility, but it's not Friar's Head. So
No.
right there, you have a leg up, and then from a pure golf course to golf course, like forget about the club, forget about whatever. Rod's work is very interesting in that there is some stylistic similarities potentially to like Bill Core and Tom Doak, where they like the blown out bunkers and whatever, but because Rod's catalog is a little bit smaller, I think there's less, I don't want to say pressure, but like there's less people knowing what that's going to look like. So he kind of gets to come into this as almost the underdog of like, you know, there's no Tom Doak golf course there's no Rod Whitman golf course that everybody's played for 25 years. There's no, Cabot Links is 10 years old and it's very good, but unless you're going to Nova Scotia, you probably haven't seen a Rod Whitman golf course as much
Sure.
as Sagebrush and Blackhawk are very, very good. And so the property itself, the ranch property is very good as well, because there's two golf courses there, and the west course has the advantage of these amazing pines, like just massive, massive trees. And the golf course itself is going to wind in and out of these trees. So it's a very unique routing for that region, I think.
I was gonna say, I don't really think of, like, outside of maybe Calusa Pines, like, I don't really think of tree-lined golf courses in Florida whatsoever.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and this is something that Rod did in the 80s, at Wolf Creek, which is his first golf course. And so it's this routing at both Wolf Creek and at the Ranch West. It kind of goes into the trees, and so you kind of go a little bit more narrow, and you're kind of in these majestic trees, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then you emerge for 2 to 3 holes, and then you're in the open, and it's sort of like taking you on this journey around the property that you know people in Florida don't get really.
Yeah,
Like, there's not that many tree golf courses.
sure.
But then the East Course, and I don't know this for sure, but like the East Course looks to me like it's Ken's a good player, so he like it's going to be sort of this championship style. And then, I shouldn't use that word because it's obviously negative connotations, but it's going to be like this big beefy challenge. And Rod's work is somewhere in between Tom Doke and Bill Core in terms of like green complexes and intensity and whatever. And Rod's a good player, so yeah, I think I would be on the lookout for the ranch. I think the ranch is probably gonna be pretty good.
And 2 courses there as well. Yeah.
Two courses,
Wow.
yeah, and 160 acres of practice. I think that's sort of forgotten a little bit.
Well,
Is
Ken,
you know that
have you been to Friars? Because they have probably the best practice facility in America. I mean, it's insane. Their short course is unbelievable too, and it never gets talked about as like an asset to the club. But I have high expectations for Ranch. I would imagine that anything that Ken touches, um, eh, I don't know if it's going to turn to gold because there's just so many things happening down there that I can't sit here and definitively tell you without seeing the property that it's going to be able to separate itself from some of the other golf courses that we've talked about already on this podcast. But I would put my money on the ranch as being a pretty special place, at the very least, to be a member of.
Mhm.
But what about Sandglass? That's the big Doke one. That's Doke's entrance into the mix here as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen Sandglass as much as the other ones, but I do know it's very low profile. So my perception of Doke's work recently is it's very interesting. It's almost like pushing against the current trends of building this, flamboyant, very loud golf architecture.
Well, I was gonna ask you about Childress Hall as well because I've heard some pretty exciting things about that as well. But maybe
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
comes into play in terms of what Doak's trying to do at the moment between those two golf courses.
yeah, for sure. And Pinehurst number 10 as well, right? Like it's these golf Sedge Valley, like they're very, I would say, I don't want to use the term woke, but they're like it's not woke golf. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's very classy, and it's almost more understated than he used to build. Like, he kind of saw what's going around, in the environment. Went,
I think
oh,
he
these
likes
guys
to
are building.
zag. I think he likes to
Yes,
zag. Yeah.
yeah. So I know like Sandglass. There's an Eden hole, and there's it's very mirror field in the old course, and it's very uh, low profile. But I haven't been on there with my own eyes, so it's hard to say exactly.
I would say, I mean, I don't know Tom Doak personally. I've read and listened to him a lot. I've probably read more things that he has written in the architecture space than I have any other architecture writer. And I've played a lot of his golf courses as well. And I would say that what you're describing in terms of him potentially mapping out a new style for him to sink his teeth into in this next stage of his career, it does sort of fall in line with the pioneering nature that he's always had. I mean, I do think probably if I had to guess that he has felt like not necessarily his style has been copied, because I think a lot of the new architects are doing a really interesting and good job to separate themselves. Like, you wrote about this really well with Brian Schneider, in terms of how Brian Schneider obviously came from this massive Doke
Mhm.
influence, but like, I feel like Brian Schneider, I can now starting to separate what a Brian Schneider golf course looks like compared to a Doak golf course, in terms of like, it's clear that Schneider's obsessed with like Walter Travis, for example, right now for the
Yeah.
moment. And I have no idea whether that's going to continue throughout his career, but it seems like he's focused on that at the time being. And I'm really just interested to see where Tom Doak goes next. And maybe we see that with Childress and Sandglass. I mean, from what I have heard, and this is secondhand, Doak is talking about, and this could transition us into Texas, but Doak is talking about Childress Hall like it's as Sandhills.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, honestly, it's been a long time since I played a golf, and I know it, like, of people who have played it, it's somewhat controversial, a bit, and it's
Childress.
very, yeah, Childress. It's very new in its lifespan, right? Like, it's been only been open 4 months or something. So, like, when I'm saying controversial among people who've played it, it's like 3 people or, 7 people. It's like very new. It's not fully, like, it's still very new in its lifespan, but it's an interesting, like, I would say it's very, I mean, it's so good. Like, I was so
It's a pretty
mesmerized by
dramatic
the
site,
course.
right?
Yeah, the Gil Hanse course is a bit more, rollicking, call it, because it's in like these Irish dunes almost. Like, it's really crazy. And Tom's course plays up top, so it's called the upper course, and it plays in the high, sort of like, I don't want to say meadow because it's desert, like deserty, sort of like prairie. Like, it's a very interesting mixture. And then it eventually finds its way to the canyons overlooking this river. So it tells a story. I think it's very deliberate in what it wants to do. If that makes sense, where it's like, it's so minimalist, um, where it's hard to say, but the figure that I heard is like less than 5,000 cubic yards of dirt removed, which is like less than Sand Hills.
Mhm.
It's like, that's insane to think about. Like, you could push around a backyard and move 5,000 cubic feet of dirt. Like,
Sure.
you build a pool, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's really quite insane to think that somebody built this golf course on this really dramatic piece of land with only pushing around, basically flattening tee boxes and shaping a couple greens. But Childress is very good in that it really heavily leans into the course within a course concept with George Thomas. So there's many times where it's like,
Uh, Speak on that just a little bit further, because what do you mean by course within a course?
yeah, of course. So George Thomas wrote about that he wants. There was this concept that he had, that he wants like two layouts within a golf course, basically, or he wants the strategic benefits of that. But like LACC, for example, is a really good um, course to look at, because that one par three on the front nine, I think it's 7, right, where
Mhm.
it could play like 310 yards, and it was
That
designed as a par
It's
four.
kind of a flex par 3, par 4. Yeah. But
Exactly, right.
6 is as well, because 6 you could almost play 6 like a long par 3 if you wanted to too.
Yeah, and 11's very long, and etc. So I think George Thomas was very big. He was a big cerebral thinker. Like, he was, you could almost call him galaxy brained, right? Like, he was trying to think like so far in the future on how to make his golf courses interesting. Um, and that included like multiple layouts within one layout and holes that were flexible and etc. And Childress is very much like that, where it's like, if you get like a back left flag, for example, on a random hole, you might walk off back left. But then if you get a front right hole, you're going to walk off front right. And depending on what that is, I mean, that could change the whole strategy by 60 yards. So it's a very, I would say, progressive golf course, and it doesn't feel like, it's easy to hear that description and go, oh, it's overcooked. Like, it's not. the
Yeah.
biggest leap in the world to go, oh, it's like it's too, it gets too obsessed with itself. I think it's very, very progressive, I would say.
Do you think it's going to be open to acclaim? Like, when I hear you say those things, I couldn't help but think about Old Barnwell a little bit, and I'm trying to think about, like, compare the opening of a Childress to the acclaim that we saw from a golf course like Old Barnwell. Do you think that it will have a similar reception, or there might be a little bit more pushback with this one? And were you surprised to see the acclaim that Old Barnwell received? This is a golf course that, after reading your writing, I'm pretty sure that you like. I couldn't tell if you love.
Yeah, no, I love Old Barnwell. I wasn't surprised, but I don't foresee Childress having the same impact. Mostly because I mean, there's some major impact. There's some major differences here. One, Aiken is quite a bit easier to get to, and there's already destinations and people traveling there, the Masters and whatever. I mean, Childress is 3.5 hours from Dallas Fort Worth. The town is 5,800 people. Like, it's not
Yeah.
really a place that people go. Like, nobody goes there. And like,
Well,
of that
as long as
5,800
they've
people,
got as long as they've got a private airport nearby, then the members will be able to get there fine.
yeah, exactly, yeah. They do for sure.
Yeah.
But of that 1,500, it's like 1,500 of those people are in the state prison, and another 50 of those are Childress employees or whatever. So it's like this very small town. And it's a bit more kind of destination golf than Old Barnwell. Like, Old Barnwell's dedicated to, there's an element of, I don't want to say public play, but there's an element of like community. Um,
Old
you know,
Barnwell is like a way more, seems to be a way more welcoming endeavor. I have no idea how interested a place like Childress Hall is going to be in publicity or media, or getting a bunch of Raiders there, or getting a bunch of pieces out there on it. Like, you think about a place like Fall Line, for example. Like, I don't think Fall Line's interested in any of that stuff at all.
yeah, and I would assume that Childress is very similar, just because some of this, Colin Sheehan's involved in both, and
Yeah.
Sandglass isn't involved in it or isn't interested in it either. And there's some common. Sandglass is not a Colin Sheehan, a hoopy model, but it's Tom Doke and all, these people are kind of, I think now, because the market's so hot for golf architecture, unless you really want it, you don't need it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would be surprised if Childress gets the same sort of immediate attention that Old Barnwell does. But I do think in time we'll come to know Childress as like this mega player in the U.S. golf scene.
Do you think that the golf course is baked in enough for you to, like, where would you place it compared to some of the other Dokes you've played? Or do you feel like you need a couple more spins around it, and the golf course really needs to settle in before you could make a definitive statement on that?
No, I don't. I mean, it was surprising how well it growed in, actually, because it was only 2 months, 3 months old when I played it, so it was very new still.
Not
And
really a ton of photographs on it online yet, or anything like that either.
no, 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 no photos, which is
Yeah.
pretty awesome, honestly. Like, to go and have no idea what to expect. I mean,
Or what it
these
was even
days,
gonna look like. Yeah.
what it was even going to look like. Like, these days, I make trips to like northern Canada to go find something unique that nobody's taking photos of, just because I want that rush of like seeing something that I've never seen on Instagram, right? Like,
I feel
it's
the same way. I don't
yeah.
like knowing.
But so interesting against Dokes. I mean, I haven't played like Ballyneal, for example. Like, I've heard a
Mhm.
couple people compare it to Ballyneal. I like it more than Rock Creek Cattle Company, and I think Rock Creek Cattle Company is underrated.
Yeah.
So I would put Rock Creek Cattle Company in the world top 50. So I mean, do with that what you will, but I mean, Childress is comfortably in that discussion of like the best, Dokes in North America for sure. Like, it would be like Pacific Dunes, Ballyneal, Cattle Company, Childress Hall. It would be like the main ones that you'd start to throw out, I would think.
Sure, sure. And what else did you see in Texas? Was Childress probably the best thing that you saw on your recent Texas trip?
Yeah, Texas was definitely, or sorry, Childress was definitely the best thing I saw in Texas. But the one that was really interesting to me was it's called TX0, but it was called Wolf Point, and so it's like it's got this name change, but it's designed by Mike Nuzzo, and it's in Port Lavaca, and it's owned by the Dormy Network now, but it's not part of the Dormy Network. Like it's a separate membership, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, but it was such an interesting take on strategy because it's like old Augusta, for example, was very like loose in what it wanted you to do. Depending on where the flag was, there was like a multitude of options that you could play, and it really had me thinking about like the perception of strategy, like how much does being able to see what we're doing affect strategy, right? Like you think about a dog like left, more times than not there's a bunker on the left corner of the dog leg and there's a bunker on the outside right corner. You know what the hole is asking you to do. But if you take away all those visual cues and you just sort of have golf, like it takes time to figure out. And I think that's a very interesting example. And then, of course, everyone's talked about the greens, right? And Wolf Point's greens are um, some of the most, interesting greens I've ever seen in my life because they're able to be built for 6 members, right? Like it's not a
Is it
big club
really
at all.
that small, huh?
Hmm. Hmm.
I was gonna say the other golf course in Texas that I was going to ask you about, the Chet Williams one. What was the one that came in and snaked Golf Digest best new in the past year?
Yeah, that was the
I could pull
Covey.
the
I
Covey,
didn't get a
yeah,
chance to see it.
yeah, yeah. Because I was surprised. My friends at Old Barnwell and Tree Farm were quite disappointed to see the Covey come in at the 11th hour and take that best new, and it wasn't a golf course that I had heard about too much at all. I mean, I before going to see Tree Farm and Old Barnwell, there was so much written about these golf courses, like, those were big openings, and some of the golf courses that we're seeing in Florida too, like, I feel like Apogee's a pretty big opening for the
Hmm.
most part. Obviously, Cabot was like a huge opening, and then you had Covey, which I didn't even know was happening. It seems like he was like a Whispering Pines guy, and so that was I was going to ask you if you had seen that one or heard too much about that one either.
No, I didn't. I didn't get a chance to see that. Unfortunately, it was a pretty chaotic trip.
I heard that as well. Or I was going to say something more about the construction of it, but
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I know. I don't honestly know too much about that. I know Chet Williams is an old Nicholas guy.
mhm.
Whispering Pines obviously is well regarded by digest raiders and some other people as well. So I'm sure it's very good. I think the backlash was hard to sort of watch from the outside because it's like you had people that like have never played this golf course and
Yeah.
they're talking about it as if there's no way it could be better than Old Barnwell. And obviously there's flaws in the best new um, awards where it's like you should it, in my opinion it should be like an editorial staff thing. Like it should be 5 people, 2 people, 10 people, whatever it is. Like they play like the 5 contenders and then they sit down together in a boardroom and go, this is who we want to give it to. Not 5 different people play the Covey, 5 different people play the Old Barnwell, and you compare the numbers. You go, how is that even possible?
You're also having people come in and playing it at different times of the year and different times during its growing stage. So, like,
Hmm.
for example, Tree Farm, I think that Tree Farm will I don't know if it's going to end up and settle in I'm talking about golf.com right now, for example.
Sure.
Like, Tree Farm didn't open inside the top 100 of the most recent golf.com ratings. But Old Barnwell opened at 50. And I was surprised about the gap between those two, and I'm not sure in my head if that gap is where it's ultimately going to settle, where Tree Farm is in a top 100 golf course and Old Barnwell is somewhere in the 50s. But a bunch of the people that went to go rate Tree Farm, because their rule at Golf Magazine is that if the golf course is open for members, then we have free reign to go see it. So
Mhm.
even a lot of the ratings, like one of the reasons why Tree Farm opened up so much lower than Old Barnwell, I wouldn't even there's some context there in terms of like I wouldn't even use that as a tool to definitively say that Old Barnwell was like widely recognized by all of the raters as a demonstrably better golf course. A lot of those raters saw Tree Farm at a time when it wasn't even really supposedly ready. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of that context in there as well when you're talking about best new golf courses. There really should be like a 2-year trial period, I feel like, if you're being honest.
Mhm. Yeah, or, you have, like, Golf Digest has Stephen Hennessy and Derek Duncan, and, like, you pick 6 of 5 of your seasoned panelists, and you go, "Okay, we're gonna go in the quote unquote high season. We're gonna go to let's just talk this year, for example. We're gonna go to Childress Hall, Sandglass, um, I don't know, whatever else is opening, and we're all
Sure.
gonna do it together, and we're gonna
Apogee. Yeah.
Apogee, yeah, we're anonymously gonna submit our ballots in a hat, and we're gonna pull it out, and this is the reality. Instead of it being like, the top 100 list, for example, works because there's a lot of overlap, and who's the guy who's seen the 10th best golf course has probably seen the 75th, or if he's seen the 10th, he's seen the 78th. Like, there's like enough overlap that it works. But new golf courses, because they're so fickle, and people have to like specifically go and travel for them, I feel like there should be a different approach to it. But maybe that's just me.
That's a pod for another day. I was gonna ask you mainly about don't get me going on the rating stuff because that's a whole other podcast we could do. Um, give me one or two more that caught your attention from your Texas trip, and then I wanted to close out with one other macro question with you about where you think things are headed.
Yeah, of course. I saw Luling, and I think Luling
This
is
is
going to be,
the place outside Austin, right? This is the
yeah,
Mark Andreessen property, correct?
yeah. So it's about an hour south of downtown Austin. Right on, what is the interstate? I-20 or something. One of the interstates that goes through there.
Yeah. Heard quite a bit
Um,
about this place. What'd you think?
yeah, it's really. I mean, there's two golf courses. So there's the OCM course, and there's the Kyle Franz course. And so the Kyle Franz course is very, I would say, course within a course as well. It's got multiple routes, and it's split fairways, and it's like Carew in that regard, but it's a bit more toned down. I think Carew does a very good job of being built for the resort golfer, right? Like, you go, and it's just like sensory overload. It's just like, I can't even believe that this is like it's a really fun place to play golf. And Luling is similar in that element, like where it's got the split fairways and some bigger greens, but the greens are a bit more subdued, where there's a bit more. I don't want to say strategy because that's the wrong word, but there's just a bit more of like,
Yeah.
subduedness in the greens.
I was gonna
So
ask you stylistically, like, how would you do you feel like a OCM, like, do you feel like they have a design? Do you feel like when you're playing an OCM course at this point? Does that make sense? Like, do you feel like they're starting to figure out their identity, and how does Lulim, like, how would you describe it stylistically? What kind of golf course does it look like? Because I know their other work recently with Fall Line. Fall Line is supposed to be like in the English Heathland style mold. Is Luling like that at all?
like, I haven't played a OCM yet, but like everything I've seen from pictures, they're like chameleons. Like, they're just they're able to switch their style a lot. So
Yeah.
Luling in that regard is it's like I don't want to. It's like almost Lido inspired, where the bunkers are just like these carnivorous pits. Like it's just if you go in
Interesting.
them, it's they're
Yeah.
sunken below the ground. There's nothing like too crazy about it. And then you get to like the middle of the back nine, I think. Like it's still pretty new, so there's a lot to come through
I
still.
haven't
And
seen any
they're
photos.
massive.
That's why I ask. I'm so curious to like see aesthetically what type of golf course this turns out to be or what it even looks like.
Yeah, I would say like think about like Lido meets Muirfield meets Prestwick. Like it's very Scottish.
It's very cool.
Yeah, that would be the best way to describe it, I think. Yeah.
Interesting. But you're still Childress, you still is the more impressive opening for you in
It's hard,
Texas between
Yeah,
those 2.
Luling's not open yet. Like it's hard to see, but Childress is like to me. I don't want to say it's like a generational golf course because Tom Doke's given us like 7 in his life. But if any other designer opened Childress Hall, it would be like you have a great career. Like it's like you
Yeah.
win one Stanley Cup, and it's like you had a great career, right? Um,
Yeah.
Childress is special. It's true. I think it is truly in the upper echelons of America.
Yeah. Do you think that Fall Line or is it Lu Ling with a G or M? I keep
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
it's Lu
Luling.
Lim in my head. Lu Ling. Do you think that Fall Line or Lu Ling has the ability to do to Jeff Ogilvy and Cocking what our old Barnwell may have done to Schneider? Do you think that either of those golf courses are going to open to a similar acclaim that we've seen with old Barnwell?
It does seem like they have the ability to for sure. And I think
I was thinking that, yeah.
what is it? What is it? Tepetonka in Minnesota? I mean, that's another OCM design that like any of these could go for them. Like they're busy in the States now. I mean, they got they just finished Medina and they got
And
you know
Medina's gonna get a ton because Medina's hosting a big professional event. So when when a President's Cup goes back to Medina, I
mhm.
think that's only gonna do more positive things for their resume.
Yeah. So I think OCM is you want to talk about the future of golf architecture. I mean, OCM will be there. Like I think they'll firmly be in sort of like the next wave. Not that
I agree.
you know Tom and Bill Core are like they have maybe Bill Core like less because I think the rumor is he wants to retire. But Bill Core and Gil like have or sorry Tom Doak and Gil Hans have like a decent amount of time left to build golf. Like they're not in the next 10 years they're not leaving. So,
And they have
but
no signs of slowing down. Like
yeah, no
there's a
signs of
lot
slowing
on their
down.
docket as well coming up too.
Yeah, so OCM I think will firmly be in there, especially once all these things open and you sort of have like stateside examples, especially if they're so different, which they look to be, right? Like if a firm's able to show that they can do like 4 styles or not even styles, but like fit into the environment so well, they're
Yeah.
they're they're going to be a force, I think.
Which it seems like OCM is
Hmm.
displaying their range with the property in
Hmm.
Texas and a place like Fall Line, which you're telling me are a little stylistically. I mean, the final question that I would ask you, and this is the number one thing that I always think about whenever I have these conversations, particularly on this subject about how exciting this boom that we appear to be in right now, where it seems like there's a little bit of a passing of the torch to this new era of OCMs and Schneiders and Kyle Franz and Gil Hanse, obviously, and Wagner are already in that mix as well. But the vast majority of the golf courses that we've talked about, no one is ever going to see. I mean, most of these golf courses in Florida, particularly the 2 ones that we talked about in Texas, even a lot of the new stuff that's happening in Georgia and South Carolina as well, ultra
Hmm.
private. And it seems like outside of, maybe recently with the park is like a great example in the last 3 to 5 years where you had an awesome name brand architect like a Gil Hansen and Jim Wagner design something public.
Hmm.
But what Is this a good thing? Like what, like how do we define this where it seems like all of these golf courses are super super exciting new developments, but no one's really ever going to see them?
I think it's easy to get lost in the models of these places, right? Like it is very exclusive and it's very difficult to access a lot of these places. I mean, there's still quite a bit going on in the public world too, right? Like it's not shocking that.
Not at the level of this though. I mean, like
Well,
some of
no, but
this
it's yeah,
stuff that we're talking about, like Childress, like the way that you're describing it, this is the ability to be like a top 100 in the world, probably.
yeah, for sure. But it's always been like that, right? Like golf architecture is largely the study behind closed doors, right? It's like
Mhm.
NGLA, Shinnecock, LACC, like, but and they make the big news because generally they're very good. But it's like, Gil Hanse is renovating Maggie Hathaway in LA, right? Like
Mhm.
it's like nobody's going to cover that, but they're doing that. Or Mike Young in Georgia with Warmouth Sands, or Rod Whitman in British Columbia with Cabot Revelstoke. Like there's David McClay Kidd at Gamble Sands, right? Like there's examples of public golf that I think just sort of get lost in the cycle. And obviously, I think there will be a cool down of some sort of these private clubs in the ends of the earth. But even on my Texas trip, it's like I went to Texas Rangers in Fort Worth. Trade Camp redesign. It's $60 to play or whatever it is, and there's good stuff happening. It's a little bit harder to find, and it's more. I would say it's more community focused, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like if you ask like people in LA, they would know about Maggie Hathaway, or if they play Maggie Hathaway, they're going to know about Maggie Hathaway.
Yeah.
Um,
I wouldn't say living in LA, it's like part of the golf culture or golf
well,
lexicon,
of
but
course, yeah.
I'm certainly familiar with it. Yeah, I didn't know that Gil was doing work there, but I will say, like, in terms of the golf course that, like, all of the golfers love, if you're not, like, the real golfers, like, the real players that are a little bit more into the architecture side of things and really care about golf, but obviously aren't a member of a Riviera, Bel Air, or LACC. Rustic Canyon has like a
Mhm,
devoted following in LA, and that's an original Hance golf course that is public, that was designed in the exact same vein. It's like there's a ton of George Thomas influence there, obviously,
mhm.
with Jeff Shackelford, and that's like I probably talk about that golf course on this podcast more than I talk about nearly any other golf course in terms of like how important that golf course is to like the culture and my shaping and understanding architecture.
It's just like I think this is on people like me, honestly, because it's there is public golf that's being renovated. The PJ National, right? Like the match course. It's like, yeah, we all get hyped up about a hoopy and these private clubs that celebrate match play. Well, it's like you can go to PJ National and play an Andy Staples renovation, right? Like it's designed with the same thing in mind. Obviously, my
You may lose a
my
couple more balls there than at a hoopy.
correct. Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. And it's a slightly different mandate because it's taking a housing community and trying to make it interesting. Um, but I do think if you're on social media, it's easy to get dragged into like the hype of these private places that you'll never be able to play, and all these things that like is a very real complaint in the discourse of golf architecture. It's like if I ever post about, I posted an Instagram post about TX0. It's like there's 6 members. Like who actually cares about this, right?
Yeah, I know.
Versus like, when Warmouth Sounds or Jekyll Island, right? When Jekyll Island opens up, the renovation and restoration at Jekyll Island, it's like those are impactful. Like those matter, right? So I do think when we start talking about the future, that some of this private stuff will bust, or not bust, but it'll definitely slow down. And I think it's kind of up to us to prop up like the Jekyll Islands and the Warmouth Sands and the Maggie Hathaways and the parks
Yeah.
and the rusted canyons of the world.
Yeah. Well, half the people that care about the private golf care way more about getting something in the pro shop than they do actually playing the architecture of the golf course. Like I think that Rustic Canyon in LA, it's not, I mean, it's certainly not Bel Air, Riviera, or LACC, but like if you were to go to Los Angeles on a trip and you wanted to try and understand like the flavor of who George Thomas is, you can get like a lot of that in Rustic Canyon, even down to like a big staple of George Thomas was the opening par 5 into a long, difficult second hole par 4, like, you have that
Mhm.
at all 3 of those George Thomas golf courses, and Rustic Canyon has that, like, Rustic Canyon even has that despite the
Mhm.
fact that it obviously wasn't designed by George Thomas, it's a modern design, and it still has a barranca that runs through it, so I could talk to you about this stuff for hours, but that's always the question that I keep coming back to, and you were the perfect person to talk to because you've seen a lot of these golf courses recently on a trip, and I just keep thinking, man, like I'm so excited to see all of these places because it seems like some of the architecture that's happening at some of these places outside of the fact that I think we're now starting to uncover some really, really awesome sites in Florida and
Mhm.
Texas, 2 golf courses that for their mass, like for their size, for the amount of people and land they have, were underserved, in my opinion, in terms of great golf courses. And it seems
Mhm.
like that's starting to even out a little bit. I just hope I can see them, man. You know what I mean?
Well, it's tough. I mean, it is tough, and it starts with Sandhills probably, right? Like Sandhills is the shift in this sort of model where people start to realize that they can build golf in the middle of nowhere and they can build really good golf. But I don't know if we'd be here without Bandon Dunes, right? So you
Yeah.
kind of hope that somebody goes and sees these places and sees the fall lines and the high groves and the childresses of the world and kind of goes, I wonder if this would work in a public market. And then that's sort of when we start to get change. I would struggle to see
Well,
a world and
Park kinda did it, right? Like,
yep,
Park is probably the best example of exactly what you're talking about, and Park, to my understanding, I don't know the finances of the park about whether it's financially successful, but it seems like it's working.
on bumps out there. Like it really
Yeah.
is just this absolute electric place to go. So yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? Like obviously rich people are going to be rich people, like they're going to go build crazy stuff and spend money however they want, but as long as somebody like a Mike Kaiser kind of sees this next wave and goes, "Wow, this is really cool. I could do this in my state," and then all of a sudden it's public and et cetera and et cetera. I think everything will be all good.
Andrew Harvey, where can people find your work? This was a blast, man.
Yeah, thanks. It was an absolute blast. Golf Club Atlas is the website, so that's there's somewhat of a steady stream of content. We're getting back into it now,
Yeah.
especially now that it's
Is
summer.
is there any trips you have upcoming or golf courses that you're excited to write about soon?
Yeah, just honestly, just catching up on everything that I've played, and then I'm gonna go see. Speaking of new public golf courses, I'm gonna go see Poppy Ridge, the new Jay Blassie, and
Very,
what is it?
very friendly with Jay. He's actually I was supposed to go see the golf course on a tour with him before it opened a couple months ago, and I had to cancel, but Jay's a good friend, and I'm sure he did phenomenal work. I that's
Mhm, of
You're coming to my neck of the woods, so let me know if you're around and want an extra day to
course.
play, but, um, I bet Poppy's gonna be awesome because I think super, super highly of Jay.
Yeah, yeah, Poppy, and then I'm going to. I'm not sure yet, but England and France, and maybe Netherlands and Belgium. I got that. I got the flights booked. Now it's time to book golf, so that'll be in a couple
That'll
months.
do.
And yeah,
Wow. Do you have is Golf Club Atlas your full-time thing now, or do you have a real person job that allows you to get away with some of this travel as well.
Yeah, Golf Club Atlas is the full-time gig now. So
Yeah.
that was sort of the idea with the merger is, hey, let's turn this into a viable thing that you and I can kind of leave the call it quote unquote side hobbies and just dedicate our full time to it. So that's what we're working on now.
Cheers. I have a lot of admiration for it, and continue the great work. I'll certainly be popping in there in the forums from time to time, and excited to check out more of your writing throughout the rest of the year. And hopefully we could make it out there on the course ourselves someday soon. Thanks for joining me, Andrew.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks.